Everyone. So I was talking to someone earlier today and demoing Cortex, and they made the comment, wow, this looks exactly like Cherwell. This means that I don't have to train my team on where to find things because everything looks just like a BizOp form in Cherwell. I may have been paraphrasing some of the bits at the end, but the wow, this looks just like Cherwell was amazing to me. You have no idea how excited that made me when I heard that, um, because that's exactly what I was going for with Cortex. If you've been following the channel for a while, you've seen some of this. You've seen the evolution of Cortex from just being able to find records in the database all the way to now where it um, shows a BizOp form. It shows grids from the database. And along the way, we've added the capability to do searches, both ad hoc and saved searches that were previously defined in Cherwell. We've seen the ability to get access to attachments that are on business objects. And in today's video, I have a couple announcements that I'm really excited about. But before we get into that, I do want to remind you all that every Tuesday, I know this video is coming out a little bit late this week, um, but every Tuesday, I host what I call the Cortex Users Group. It's an opportunity for people who are using Cortex, thinking about using Cortex, or still just using Cherwell and trying to figure out where to go from here, to talk about everything in that realm. Whether you're using Cortex, thinking about using Cortex, um, you are welcome to talk to me, to ask me questions, or to talk to your peers, other people who are also using Cortex. Um, it's a conversation. It's the start, what I hope to be the start of a vibrant community around Cortex and what we continue to do into the future. Again, more on that later. Um, in the style of the Cherwell users groups. So it's something I'm excited about. I hope you're excited about it too. If you want to be able to come to that, there's a link down in the description below to request an invite, as well as a bunch of other links to see Cortex and learn more about Cortex and talk to me and all that good stuff. So let's get into a demo, because the first announcement that we have is that Cortex 1.4 is coming extremely soon. I just published the release candidate. You can actually download that from the releases site. Um, in all likelihood, that's what's going to be the final version, but there will be a new version published that actually says 1.4. That'll be the official version. So if you want to get in early and check it out and make sure that it works for you, go ahead and check out that release candidate. You can find that linked down below. So here we have Cortex. I'm going to log in as CSD admin, and I can see my autocomplete is trying to help here. The username for this site, there are three. There's CSD admin, Emma, and Claire, and we'll see a couple of the other ones a little bit later. The password for all three of these users is password, and the login screen tells you that as well. So when you come to Cortex, you get a search panel, a search box. And you can search any business object that's in the system. It defaults to incident, and that's because we'd like to use incident as a demo business object. And at least in the IT world, that's kind of where we start. So we'll start with incident. We'll say printer as our search term. We can add filters. We could actually add quite a few filters, but let's just stick with one. We'll say we want where the status is equal to the specific value closed. We'll just search. And we get three results back. And because we search for incident, we get the incident grid. So whatever you have defined as the grid for the business object that you're searching for in Cherwell, is what Cortex is going to use. Um, so type assign team. This is all the out of the box grid because I'm running on an out of the box database. Let's drill into one of these incidents and see what it's all about. If you're familiar with the out of the box content, you'll recognize this as the BizHub form that's defined in the Cherwell demo database, complete with form arrangement. So this particular incident has a few tabs. We can see the tasks that are associated. There are no tasks associated with this particular incident. Related CIs, events, there are none. Resolution details, great. Journals, we see all of them. We can drill into journals. So we see all that information. We can hit the back button to go back to the incident. And let's go to related CIs. So we can drill into the related CI. And now we're on a new BizOp form. And it shows us all of the stuff we expect to see on a configuration item. In this case, it's a printer. It makes sense because we search for incidents having to do with printers. And we see all of the tabs associated with printers. You don't have to deal with rule of two because it brings you to a completely new BizOp form. If you want to go back to the incident, you just hit the back button in the browser. It's as simple as that. And here we get things like events. Again, there are no events on this because it's out of the box. Upstream CIs, downstream CIs, other configuration items. We can scroll to the right and see services. And this has quite the grid. If we go back to overview, we can see all the information about this particular configuration item. Now you'll notice that there are some in Cherwell, these would be links on the side. Cortex doesn't do one steps because it's read only, and B, it doesn't do automation because most one steps are going to change properties or create new records or manipulate records some way, and that's not what Cortex is designed to do. So those still show up on the form because many of those links that would kick off one steps do contain information. For instance, like this one up at the top, that is technically a link, but it also has the email address. So we want to keep that on the screen. If we go back to the incident form, you'll notice that specifics show up. So embedded forms work. Pretty much I think at this point, every single form widget works. Form control works. It may not show in quite the same way as it would in Cherwell, mainly because it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be a read-write control. So, for instance, submit incident, where it says submit incident here, rather than being a text box, it's just text on the page. That's okay. Most of these controls, they just need to show the text. The only ones that are special, like this image control, are the ones that don't just show text. Another thing worth mentioning is that these tabs, there's a lot of complexity with the relationships and the way related items show up. That's something that I just recently got working. Every single tab in the out-of-the-box system works in Cortex, which means there's a really high confidence that any tab that you have in your system will work in Cortex. And if it doesn't, that's a bug, and definitely report that. But to my knowledge, Cortex works with 100% of the tabs that it's been tested on, both in out of the box and in some customer databases as well. We also do saved searches. This can be helpful if you have a search that looks at a particular subset of records, maybe incidents having to do with a particular change that there might be questions on, at some point in the future. Rather than trying to search for those incidents, ad hoc, you can just go, I'm just going to pick all closed incidents, but there we go. I can run that saved search and I get all closed incidents. Every single grid in the system has an export CSV button at the top that exports all of the records for that particular grid. and all of the columns that are visible in that grid. So what that means is that in this particular case, this grid has, whatever, 10 or 12 columns. Those are the ones that get exported. This particular search only has one page of results. But for other grids, like say if I go to browse and go to incident, this has something like 81 records, 84 records, multiple pages. The export CSV button actually exports all of those records, all 84 of those records, not just the 30 or so that are visible on this screen. I also mentioned attachments. So let's go look at that. So here's one. Here's an incident that I created in Cherwell and added an attachment to. And you can see there's an attachment right there. I can click it and I get the attachment. In this case, it's an image, so it just pulls it up in the browser. But you can also save this. If it were a PDF, it would save. If it's an exe, it would save. Be careful with those, right? But whatever type of attachment it is, you'll be able to see it, download it, and work with it from there. That's where we are right now, and we do have a 1.5 planned. We've got a few features in the works to just enhance some of the user interactions, mostly in response to feedback from customers like you. But at this point, I'd say 95% of what people are, I'd say 100% of what people are going to use on a consistent basis is in Cortex, and everything from this point on is just gravy. Now, I will say that I've heard from multiple different people that there's some. I'm going to be. I'm not going to try to create any worry or any additional chaos here, but I've heard some concerning things about the communication that's coming from Avanti. So I highly recommend moving quickly, not too quickly, but moving quickly on whatever your path forward is from Cherwell. Make sure you have your plan in place. Make sure you figure out what you're going to do next, and get ready to start acting on that. At this point, Cortex is ready to be that archival solution for you. It's ready to be there for any audits or any compliance requirements that you might have, and it's ready to be that historical lookup tool. So realistically, you don't need Cherwell anymore. As long as you have something to run your day-to-day operations, you don't need Cherwell anymore. Talk to us, and we'll get you set up with Cortex. And that actually brings me to my next announcement, which is, okay, so Cortex has 95% of the functionality that we're going to be adding to Cortex, at least from the perspective of an archive and audit tool. So what comes next? Two things. One, response to your feedback. If there's something you want to see in Cortex, let me know. If there's a bug that you find in Cortex, absolutely let me know. I want to fix that. I want to make sure there are no bugs affecting anyone. And I'll even include in bugs, if you see Cortex behaving differently from the way Cherwell does, even though neither tool necessarily is doing it wrong, it's just different. Let me know, because obviously we want to make sure that what you're seeing in Cortex is exactly what you're seeing in Cherwell. And to the extent possible, I've been testing. I've written automated tests to make sure that Cortex is consistent with itself and consistent with what I'm seeing in Cherwell. But everyone's system is different. Some of your systems might be leveraging certain edge cases that work a particular way in Cherwell that I just haven't seen yet. And I want to make sure that I do see them, make sure that I account for them in Cortex. So that's thing number one. That's next. Thing number two is there's still a significant amount of functionality that existed in Cherwell that just isn't going to exist in your next tool. It's kind of the nature of the market, the nature of the way that the ITSM tools and ITSM platforms have gone. So I fully recognize that some of the additional stuff that you've built in Cherwell, additional workflows, additional processes that you've built in Cherwell just aren't going to have an analog in another tool. And, depending on what they are, that might be okay. Or it might not. You might spend money working with a consultant or a contractor to build something custom onto your next ITSM tool. You might be able to configure your ITSM tool to do something more or less the same. You might go searching for another tool. What I'm going to do, what Synapse Software is going to do, we're actually working on a IT and business process automation tool platform, kind of in the same spirit as Cherwell, though whether or not we actually build an ITSM tool, ITSM system on top of it, that still remains to be seen. But at the very least, we want to support all of those cool and useful process workflow features that you've been using. I've talked to a few of you already and asked you some questions about how you're currently using Cherwell for things that aren't necessarily the base ITSM functionality, and gotten a lot of good feedback back. It's been really good to have those conversations. I'd love to have some more. I'd love to show you a sneak peek of what we're working on. Previously on the channel, there have been a few videos kind of with a very primitive version of what we're thinking of. But coming here soon, hopefully next week, maybe the week after, I want to show actually an end-to-end demo that's basically building a little application, a little internal application on our platform. So stay tuned for that. And if you have any thoughts, feedback, requests, let me know. I'm really excited about this. This is something that I've actually been working on now for several years. It just wasn't quite ready for consumption because there's a lot that needs to be accounted for in a platform like this. But I think it's pretty close. But I will say, I want to make it very clear. My focus does not deviate from Cortex. Cortex is a product. It's ready to go. It's out there. I'm talking to a lot of you about getting Cortex set up on your Cherwell databases. And that absolutely takes priority because that's the need right now, right? We don't know exactly what the next few years is going to hold for the communication from Ivanti and exactly how the end of life path is going to look between now and the end of 2026. So we want to make sure that gap gets filled, that you have the support that you need as you transition to your new platform, and the support that you need as you find a way to visualize all of the data that you're getting from Cherwell. One last note is that getting set up on Cortex is super simple, but even with that, we're more than happy to help you get set up with Cortex because we know how critical a need this is. Getting set up with Cortex is as simple as getting a database backup from Ivanti if you're hosted. If you're on-prem, great. Just make it a backup of your database and restore it to a separate server. We do recommend using a separate server at least as long as you are still also using Cherwell. Of course, if you're hosted with Ivanti, that's the only way. You can't get direct access to your database in their hosted environment. So you do need a database backup. Restore that to a SQL server. And then Cortex, it couldn't be easier to configure it. You tell it how to connect to your database and optionally how to authenticate. There's some additional questions that go on with when we talk about authentication. There's documentation all about that, talks about some of the nuances. But if you want to get up and running quickly and start testing it out, just configure the none authentication option, and you'll just get automatically logged in as CSD admin logged in. There's no actual exchange of passwords going on. It just uses all of CSD admin's security groups and all that sort of thing. So, um, yeah. And actually, I guess there is a second thing because I did promise that I would log out and show you what it looks like to log in as one of these other users. So let me switch back to demo and log out. And now let's log in as, well, Claire, right? So Claire is not an admin. Claire does have access to a bunch of stuff, including incident. But if we go to browse, you can see she doesn't have access to agreement, uh, and a bunch of other stuff. I know this list is significantly shorter. She's got access to announcement, incident, customer, configuration item, all the main ITSM objects, but there's a lot of other stuff that she doesn't have access to. Supporting objects is significantly shorter. Lookup tables significantly shorter. And if we go into incident, we actually can't see anything because there's something going wrong with that. So maybe I shouldn't have demoed that, but we can log out and uh, check out Emma. Emma has even less access. And we can see she doesn't even have access to incident, so this doesn't auto-populate. She has access to a few other things. But if we go to browse, we see she has access to just about everything except incident, and very few supporting objects and lookup tables. So that's basically how those security groups work. CSD admin has access to everything, so uh, you get that full list. Some of those other users that have more limited security groups, they can't get access to the things they're not supposed to have access to. So that's how that works. And with that, I'm going to end the video because it's getting way longer than I intended it to be. But hope you enjoyed it. If you made it all the way to the end, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. Share this with anyone else you can think of who works with Cherwell. Now's the time to get this loud and out in front of people, because I don't want to be Chicken Little, but a lot of people are getting scared about what's going to happen with Cherwell in the next 2 years. Again, even before the end of life date. So let's make sure that everybody has their safety nets in place. Everyone has their parachutes in place. If you're not already vetting new vendors for your day-to-day operations, now's the time. Pick a new vendor as soon as you can, so you can get onboarded with them, and then also have a way to get to your data. That's all I have. That's pretty much the entire story in 23 minutes. So thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.